Have you ever heard of a moment that changed everything? That unexpected situation where a simple gesture reveals someone's true greatness? Well, what Michael Jordan did for his driver's son was something no one would have ever imagined. Many people know Jordan as the greatest basketball player of all time, an unbeatable icon on the court. But do you know who he is out of the spotlight? The human side of a legend. What he did for a humble boy proves that greatness is not measured just by titles, but by the impact we leave on people's lives. What if I told you that this story starts with a struggling boy who had an impossible dream? A boy who grew up admiring Michael Jordan, but never imagined that one day his destiny would intersect with his. What happens when an idol discovers a story that simply cannot be ignored? Before revealing all the details of this exciting story, I'll warn you, get ready to get goosebumps, because what you're about to see isn't just a story. It's proof that small gestures can change lives forever. Michael Jordan was always a giant on the court, but what he did off the court will send chills down your soul. You may know the story of the greatest basketball player of all time. You may have watched his impossible moves. You may have been thrilled by his achievements. But what if I told you that there is a side of Jordan that few people know about? A side that proves that its greatness goes far beyond basketball. What happened between him and his driver's son wasn't just a gesture. It was a real-life lesson. While Jordan shined in the spotlight, a humble young man with no resources trained alone on a makeshift court, trying to imitate every movement of his greatest idol. The boy didn't have the best sneakers, the best ball, or a coach, but he had a dream as big as Michael Jordan himself. He believed that basketball could change his life, but he knew that for someone like him, with no money, no influence, no opportunities, this dream was practically impossible. Destiny, however, was already preparing a surprise that would change his life forever. Amidst the trophies and victories, Jordan never imagined that inside the car that took him to his matches, alongside his driver, there was a story of struggle and overcoming that he needed to know. But everything changed on a day that seemed like any other. Jordan got into the car without knowing he was about to hear something that would shake his heart deeply. The driver, a man who worked tirelessly to support his family, thought he was having a private conversation with his wife on the phone. He didn't know Jordan was listening. The man's voice carried a tone of concern, almost an outburst. He said that his son had talent, that he was dedicated, that he lived for basketball, but that he was unable to give the boy the opportunity he deserved. The lack of money for a good school, a coach, adequate equipment, all of this was crushing the boy's dream. And it was there at that moment that something woke up inside Michael Jordan. The greatest basketball player in history could simply ignore it. After all, how many stories of difficulties had he heard throughout his life? But no, Jordan wasn't just an athlete. He was someone who knew what it was like to fight, knew what it was like to be discredited, knew what it was like to have to prove yourself over and over again. And when he found out what that boy was going through, he made a decision that no one expected. Michael Jordan's driver was a simple man, one of those who woke up early every day to provide for his family. He knew every route, every shortcut, every traffic sign in the city. He always drove discreetly, without attracting attention, without wanting to disturb. He was one of those employees who was always there, but almost no one noticed. For him, his mission was clear: take Jordan safely to practices, games, and commitments, ensuring that the greatest basketball player in the world was always in the right place at the right time. But behind that uniform, that steering wheel, and that silent routine, there was a man who carried a weight in his heart, a weight that he tried to hide, but that, on that specific day, he escaped in an outburst on the phone with his wife. His son was passionate about basketball, a talented boy who spent hours training alone, dreaming of one day becoming a professional player. But how can you turn a dream into reality when everything seems against it? The family didn't have money to pay for a good school, much less a coach. The boy played with an old ball, wore worn-out sneakers, and trained in the few opportunities he had. Still, he never gave up. The boy saw Michael Jordan as a god, a living legend, someone unreachable. Every game he watched, every shot, every dunk, was like a piece of inspiration that kept him going. But never, not even in his wildest dreams, did he imagine that one day his life would intersect with that of the greatest basketball player in history. The driver knew his son carried talent and determination, but he also knew that without opportunities, it meant nothing. What Jordan heard in that conversation wasn't just an outburst. It was a cry for help disguised as common words. And in that instant, something inside him changed. Jordan knew a warrior when he saw one. He himself had faced difficulties at the beginning of his career. He knew what it was like to be discredited, what it was like to fight against all odds. And more than that, he knew what it was like to need a chance. At that moment, sitting in the back seat of the car, listening to the driver's every word, Jordan had no doubts. He couldn't let that go. But what he did next was beyond what anyone could have expected. It was an attitude that would change not only that boy's life, but that of everyone around him. And if you think you already know what happened, wait until you hear the next detail in this story. If you have ever dreamed of something big, if you have ever felt the difficulty of achieving something without opportunities, comment here, "I never gave up," and keep watching, because what comes next is simply unbelievable. Every afternoon after school, the boy would take his basketball, old, worn out with patches on the sides, and go to the small neighborhood court. The floor was uneven, the hoop was crooked, and the net, long ago, no longer existed. But none of that mattered. For him, every training session was a chance to get closer to his dream. He didn't have a coach. He didn't have the best equipment. He didn't have anyone to guide him. All he had was his determination and the unwavering desire to one day become a professional player. While Michael Jordan shined on basketball's biggest stages, enchanting crowds and becoming a legend, that boy fought in silence not to give up. His eyes lit up when he saw Jordan on TV. He analyzed every movement, every dribble, every perfect shot. He didn't just want to look up to Jordan, he wanted to be like him. But unlike his idol, the boy had no opportunities. The father did everything he could to support the family, working long hours, driving to Jordan and returning home exhausted. There was no money left to pay for a training academy. There were no resources for a new pair of sneakers, nor for a decent ball. And yet, he didn't complain. He knew that his father did everything possible to guarantee the minimum for the family, and therefore he never spoke about his frustrations. I swallowed the pain, saved the tears, and continued training. He played until his feet hurt, until his hands were hurt, until night came and he could no longer see the ball bouncing on the rough ground. The cold bit his skin, but he continued. The sun burned his face, but he insisted. His dream was too big to be erased by difficulties. He tried to hide his suffering. He didn't want his father to realize how much it hurt to know that. No matter how hard he tried, he might never have a real chance. But deep down he knew. He knew he needed something more, of an opportunity, of a miracle, of a push of destiny. I just didn't imagine that this push would come from Michael Jordan himself. The boy had no idea that while fighting alone, his father had unintentionally told his story to the only person who could change everything. I didn't know that, at that moment, Jordan was already thinking about something that would transform his future forever. He was about to discover that sometimes a simple encounter can change the course of a life. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day. Michael Jordan had just come out of an exhausting training session and got into the car as always, focused on his routine with his mind on the next challenges. But what he heard at that moment changed everything. As he adjusted his seat and picked up his phone, a conversation caught his attention. The driver, who had always been discreet and professional, was talking to his wife on the phone. His voice carried a tone of concern mixed with sadness. Jordan wasn't the type to pay attention to other people's conversations, but those words grabbed him. "Our son has talent, but without help, he will never have a chance." The sentence echoed in the silence of the car. Jordan looked in the rearview mirror and saw the driver's tired face. He spoke with a heavy heart, trying to find a solution to something that seemed impossible. "He trains every day, he tries hard, he doesn't complain, but I can't give him what he needs. You know we don't have money to pay a coach, a good school, none of that." Jordan's silence grew heavy. What he was hearing wasn't just any rant. It was the cry of a father who saw his son's talent slip through his fingers, simply because circumstances were not in his favor. He could hear the anguish in this man's voice, someone who worked tirelessly to ensure the best for his family, but who, faced with reality, found himself powerless. Jordan looked out the window, but his mind was no longer there. He thought about his own story. He himself had heard that he wasn't good enough. It had already been discredited. You knew what it was like to feel like the world was against you, that no one saw your potential. But he had a chance. There was someone who bet on him. And if that boy really was talented, why couldn't he have that same chance? He became thoughtful. He was just a boy trying to make a dream come true. How many other young people full of talent never had an opportunity? How many incredible players did the world never meet because no one believed in them? At that moment, Jordan made a decision. He couldn't just ignore it. Something inside him told him he needed to do something. But what he did next, no one could have imagined. The next morning, the driver continued his routine as usual. He got up early, prepared coffee, and said goodbye to his son before leaving for another day of work. But upon arriving at the place where he used to pick up Jordan, something different happened. Before even starting the car, one of the star's assistants approached with a message directly from Michael. "Bring your son to meet me." The man, without really understanding, just nodded. His heart sped up. What did Jordan want? Why would you call your son? Upon arriving home, the driver found the boy sitting on the floor of the small room, holding the old basketball, twirling it between his hands as he always did when he was thoughtful. It went straight to the point. "Tomorrow you come with me, Jordan wants to meet you." The boy laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. "Michael Jordan, the greatest player of all time? Does he want to meet me? For what?" His father didn't have many answers. He just knew that it wasn't something he could refuse. "Just trust me, son. If he called you, it's because he has a reason." That night was different from all the others. The boy could barely sleep. He lay in bed, stared at the ceiling for hours while his heart raced. He asked himself 1,000 questions. Had I done something wrong? Did Jordan know he tried to imitate his moves by watching videos over and over again? Or had someone told him about his solitary training? Nothing made sense. But deep down, a part of him wanted to believe that this could be something big. The next morning, he dressed in his best clothes. Not that it was anything special, just the least worn one he had, and accompanied his father to his destination. Every kilometer covered felt like a step towards the unknown. When they finally arrived, his father got out of the car and told him to do the same. The boy took a deep breath, still not understanding, and took a few hesitant steps. And then when he lifted his head, there he was. Michael Jordan was standing right there, looking right at him, with his arms crossed and a slight smile on his face. The world around seemed to disappear. The boy stayed, so paralyzed. He didn't know what to say, how to react. He couldn't even breathe properly. His heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo through the silence. All he could think was, "This can't be happening." If you've ever experienced a moment that seemed unbelievable, something so big that you had trouble believing it, comment here "I know what it's like," and keep watching, because what happened after that encounter was even more surprising. The boy was still paralyzed. Michael Jordan stood before him with that serious, almost challenging look, as if he was waiting for something. The boy tried to say something, but his mouth seemed stuck. His heart was beating so hard he could feel the blood pounding in his ears. This couldn't be real. Was he dreaming? But before he could organize his thoughts, something happened. Jordan, without saying a word, picked up a basketball and twirled it between his fingers. He looked directly at the boy, evaluating every detail. Then, with a quick and precise movement, he threw the ball towards him. The boy, even taken by surprise, instinctively grabbed the ball in the air. It was at that moment that Jordan finally spoke. "Show me what you can do." The boy felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. He didn't know why he was there. He didn't know what Jordan expected of him. But he knew one thing. This was his chance. Maybe it was the only one in my life. His body was still shaking, his hands were sweaty, and his thoughts were a mess. But he took a deep breath and did what he always did. He started dribbling. The first hit of the ball on the ground echoed in the silence of the court. He started slowly, feeling the texture of the ball, adjusting his grip, focusing on his movements. Then he risked a faster dribble, changing hands with precision. His feet moved naturally, as if he were training alone on his makeshift court, as he did every afternoon. Then, without thinking much, he took a few steps back and threw. The ball cut through the air and spun smoothly, falling into the basket without touching the rim. Nothing but the network. The sound of the perfect throw made the boy's heart race even more. He looked at Jordan, waiting for some kind of reaction. The star maintained a serious expression for a moment, just observing. But then, something subtle happened. He slightly raised one of his eyebrows and let out a discreet smile. At that moment, Michael Jordan realized that boy was not ordinary. The silence that fell on the court seemed eternal. The boy, still panting, stared at Michael Jordan, trying to decipher his expression. The star didn't say anything immediately. He just walked towards the boy, picked up the ball and held it for a few seconds as if he was thinking. The boy's heart was beating so hard that he felt the echo inside his chest. Had he done well? Had he impressed his biggest idol? Or would it all end there, and he would return home as if nothing had happened? But then Jordan looked up, faced the boy with that firm, determined stance that the entire world knew, and said something that would change his life forever. "From today onwards, you no longer train alone." Time seemed to stop. The boy needed a few seconds to process those words. Did he hear you right? Had Jordan really said that? Was his idol, the greatest player of all time, telling him he no longer needed to face this battle alone? Before he could react, Jordan continued. He explained that he saw talent in the boy, that he saw a flame inside him, the same one that one day also shone in his eyes when he was just a young man looking for a chance. But talent without opportunities meant nothing, and Jordan knew better than anyone that to become a great player it took more than just effort. It took training, discipline, and above all, structure. It was then that he did something that no one expected. Jordan made the decision to play the best coaches for the kid. He would provide not only private lessons with experts, but also all the support he needed to develop his potential to the fullest. Furthermore, it guaranteed professional equipment, including high-performance sneakers, balls, and uniforms. The boy felt his eyes fill with tears. It was hard to believe this was happening. The same boy who until yesterday trained alone, with an old ball and worn-out sneakers, now had Michael Jordan by his side. The boy was still digesting everything that had just happened. His heart was beating so hard that it felt like it wanted to come out of his chest. He, who until yesterday trained alone on an improvised court, now had at his side the greatest basketball player in history, willing to help you turn your dream into reality. But if he was in disbelief, someone still didn't know anything: his father. When the driver found out what Jordan had done, he simply couldn't believe it. He always respected Michael. He always knew he was a great athlete and a man of character, but he would never have imagined that one day his idol would do something so great for his family. His first impulse was to look at his son, as if he needed confirmation that this was real. When he saw the sparkle in the boy's eyes, when he realized that his son was living one of the happiest moments of his life, the man broke down. Tears began to stream down his face, and he tried to speak, but his voice broke. After a few seconds between sobs, he looked at Jordan and said something that touched even those who witnessed the scene. "You didn't just save my son, you saved our family." Michael Jordan, who has always been known for his coolness on the court, this time was unable to hide his emotion. He stepped forward, placed his hand on the driver's shoulder and smiled. "I didn't need to say anything." The gesture spoke for itself. He knew he had done something great, but most of all, he knew it wasn't about charity. It was about justice. That boy had talent, he had passion, he had determination. All he needed was someone to believe in him. It was then that something even more exciting happened. The boy, who until that moment had been trying to hold back his tears, couldn't take it anymore. On impulse, he walked over and hugged Michael Jordan tightly, without saying a single word. It wasn't necessary. In that hug was all the gratitude, all the emotion, all the feeling that his life would never be the same again. Silence took over the court. Everyone there knew they were witnessing a moment that would never be forgotten. It was one of the most beautiful moments ever seen in the world of sport. If you have ever been moved by a gesture of gratitude, if you have ever lived in a moment where words were not enough to express a feeling, comment here now. That's greatness, and keep watching, because this story isn't over yet. The days that followed were pure transformation. The boy, who previously trained alone on an improvised court, now had access to the best coaches, the best equipment, and above all, the support of someone who knew exactly what it was like to fight to achieve a dream. Michael Jordan didn't just open doors for that boy, he completely changed his destiny. The training started intense. For the first time, the boy had a structured routine, professional support, and a real path to progress. He trained tirelessly, enjoying every minute as if it were his last. I knew that this opportunity was unique and that I couldn't waste it. Every drop of sweat that ran down his face was a reminder of where he came from and everything he had to overcome to get there. His father, who previously felt the anguish of not being able to offer his son the necessary conditions to pursue his dream, now watched everything with eyes full of pride. I saw the boy training on professional courts, being guided by experts, receiving encouragement from Jordan, and growing not only as a player, but as a human being. That boy, who was once just a dream, was now becoming a reality. Months passed and progress was undeniable. With the help of the best coaches, the boy began to stand out. His dedication was unquestionable, his technique evolved every day, and more than that, his confidence was greater than ever. The boy who once felt his dream was unattainable was now ready to fly higher. That's how, after a lot of effort, study and dedication, he finally managed to join a basketball team. It wasn't just any young man looking for a place in the sport. He carried a story, a journey marked by overcoming and above all by a gesture of generosity that changed everything. In every interview, every opportunity he had to tell his story, he made a point of repeating the same phrase. None of this would be possible without Michael Jordan. He knew that his effort and persistence were essential, but he also knew that without that decisive moment, without that meeting that seemed unlikely, perhaps his story would have a completely different outcome. Michael Jordan has already made many perfect passes on the court. He has defined games, he has won championships. But this time, he did something even bigger. He made a future happen. Now tell me, have you ever seen an act of generosity as incredible as this? How many times in your life have you caught yourself thinking that you only needed one chance, someone who believed in your talent, an opportunity to show the world what you were really capable of? This story proves that great legends are not just made of titles, but of attitudes. Michael Jordan was always a monster on the court, a basketball genius, a true champion. But what he did outside of them shows that his greatness goes far beyond the game. The boy who trained alone, who didn't have the best equipment, who played with a worn-out ball and holey sneakers, was now on the path to success. All because one day, Jordan heard, saw, and decided to act. He didn't just recognize that boy's talent, he bet on him. He used his influence, his resources, and most of all his humanity to change a life. This is what defines a true idol, and I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that great opportunities can transform a destination? Have you ever met someone who just needed one chance to prove themselves? Comment below. Now that's greatness, because I want to see how many people actually value gestures like this. And if this story moved you, share with someone who loves basketball, who believes in the power of overcoming, and who needs to hear this message today. And if you think that was the only time Jordan changed someone's life, you are very mistaken. In the next video, you will learn the unbelievable story of how Michael Jordan helped a humble McDonald's employee in a way no one expected. To watch, just click on the video that is appearing on your screen now. I'll see you there.